mobility and the Internet of Things. You guys are a very big market for mobility, so if you're looking for a project to get into penetration testing or malware analysis or really any kind of hacking project, I know mobility would be something that is a really big deal here in Brazil. So it's just what I do, but maybe it will inspire you to do something. So the name of the talk, Perimeter Has Been Shattered. Well, we'll just get to it. So there's an overview. I'm not going to read the overview. The slides are available online. Again, they're unfortunately in English, but this is what we're going to talk about today. So you've probably seen something like this. It was probably stolen from Cisco. This one anyway, because the boxes are blue. But you probably, where you work, have something like this, a network diagram where all the assets that you have to protect if you're in the security or IT department are diagrammed. So these are all the things that we have to keep secure in order for our company to continue functioning well. Unfortunately, this is not the big picture. This is what people think about. They think about desktops, maybe Windows or Linux, depending. You probably have some sort of domain. You have email servers, VPN, and then off here in the corner, actually, it has like mobility and bring your own device. Bring your own device is really big in the US. I'm sure you guys have it as well. It's a way that corporations can avoid having to spend a lot of money, buying people phones that they use for work when they already have one that they use personally. So instead, the idea is you bring your own phone that you already have to work, and it hooks up and gets email, VPN, SharePoint, things like that. But it's just a little corner here on this typical network diagram, and it's unfortunately mostly ignored by the security or the IT team. It's kind of like put in a corner and we buy some stuff and put it on top of it, and hopefully everything will be okay. But in terms of like our testing and our patching and our security awareness, we generally tend to ignore it and focus on the traditional workstations, which you may work differently than I do, but I know I spend a lot more time on my own personal devices than I do at work, sitting in front of a desk at a corporate issued workstation. That's typically not how people work most of the time anymore. You go to client sites, or you go on trips like this. If you're not from Sao Paulo, you probably brought some work with you. If you're like me, you brought work with you but didn't get it done, but I'm going to get it done tonight. So you're taking your work with you when you're on the go. You might be renting a car or getting on the airplane Wi-Fi or on a train Wi-Fi, or meeting people in coffee shops or a restaurant and getting on the Wi-Fi there. You also probably have like software as a service that you use probably at your organization. Not everything is done in-house. You may outsource, say, email to Google or Microsoft, or you may use something like Salesforce.com to keep track of leads in your sales department. You probably use social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those, and those are all a part of our corporate infrastructure, whether we like it or not. We have all these accounts that our employees have on these other services. You might have cloud computing as well, something like Amazon, AWS, or one of the other ones where you're actually using somebody else's systems, and you're in all these cases relying on somebody else to keep your network secure, because you don't have control over those devices and over their security. We saw Facebook got hacked just a couple months ago, and potentially lost some data. If your employees are using the same password on Facebook they're using for their corporate account, and it was stolen on Facebook, now you potentially have all these accounts that could be compromised internally as well, and you just don't know about it as the security team. So we can't really ignore things like mobility and the cloud and the Internet of Things, because these are all a part of how we work today and how our employees are interacting both with our network and the world at large. So we are, as a security department, going to have to start thinking about this stuff very seriously. So the threat model of your typical mobile device, it's a lot like the threat model of a typical laptop or desktop, but with some extras. So it is, you've still got the possibility of phishing. That's a really big one via email that we're really worried about on our traditional devices. Our users getting phished, clicking on a link or downloading a program onto their corporate workstation. The same thing can happen on a mobile device, and there's lots of different ways they could be phished that they may not be trained about. It's a lot easier to leave your phone around than it is to, somebody to get into your organization and steal like a server. Sure, it can happen, but it's a lot more likely because the phones go with us everywhere, and they're typically pretty small and really easy to leave lying around. So people can steal them, people can shoulder surf you. It has all these different ways that it's connected. These devices are incredibly well connected. Your typical laptop, it has maybe a wired connection and a wireless connection. Maybe it has Bluetooth. And that's all the ways that it can talk. Your mobile device can talk so many different ways. It's got the Wi-Fi, it's got the mobile carrier, it has near-field communication, it has Bluetooth. It has all these different ways that it can communicate, and these are all ways that potentially it could be attacked. The Wi-Fi chips get hit. We see over and over again the chips inside of the device are vulnerable to attack. There's also, applications. Certainly on your traditional devices, people could download malware. It certainly happens, especially with phishing. But with the applications on the mobile devices, it's just the way that they are told to use the device. Apple used the slogan, "There's an app for that." And people are told, to download an application for absolutely any problem they can think of. And there's tons of applications available to them. And, they're made to believe that, particularly in the case of Apple devices, that all the applications that are available to them are secure. And that's not necessarily always the case. There are potentially vulnerabilities in the applications. There are potentially malicious intent in the applications as well. The problem is, I think, that mobility is just a little bit more secure than what we're used to working with. We worked on securing, Windows and Active Directory and, to some extent Linux, for a really long time. We had the way things were. We had say for instance, antivirus. Let's take antivirus as an example. We in security tend to make fun of antivirus a lot because, it's not really a silver bullet. As we'll see, nothing really is. But antivirus on a traditional Windows computer, yes, it's very good at doing one particular thing, and that's finding known viruses. No, it doesn't catch really sophisticated viruses, absolutely not. But, if, for instance, my mom really likes to download games off the internet. She has a PhD in computer science. This is why we fail at security, because really smart people have to be security experts. But, everybody can't be a security expert. That's our job. So, my mom likes to download games off the internet, so she's always getting a little something extra with her games. And typically, a game off the internet isn't trying that hard. So her antivirus on her Windows machine, it catches it and it cleans it up for her. So, for that use case, antivirus is very helpful. So naturally, when mobile devices started entering the scene, all the antivirus vendors were like, okay, so instead of getting, one license per user, now we can get them to put it on their phone, put it on their tablet, as well as put it on their laptop, so we can get more money. So naturally they put the word mobile in front of the word antivirus, and all the vendors had a mobile product as well. Unfortunately, all of the mobile devices, they were brought in a little bit later than, our traditional PCs. So they were built with security in mind. I mean, even Android kind of gets a bad rap in terms of security, but Android has come a long way since it first came out. And you also have to keep in mind that, the first version of the iPhone, iOS version 1, everything ran as root, including the browser, which is terrible from a security perspective. So yeah, when they first came out, both the Android and the iPhone, weren't that great from a security perspective. But as they've matured, they've really built, security in mind at each layer. So I've got, everything from the hardware to the application layer on here, and they really are built with security in mind. So to take that antivirus example, so we put an antivirus, application sitting at the application layer on a mobile device, and in a worst case, it's really only able to look at itself and see whether it is a virus, that doesn't really provide you a lot of value. It isn't able to look at the other applications on the device, even ones that the user has downloaded. So it's not able to see, what's going on. So it doesn't provide that same value. If my mom downloads a game onto her phone, the antivirus, even if it's, a very typical antivirus, it won't be able to see it. So we made things better. Things are a bit more secure from the ground up to begin with. And that's great. Our users are better protected, but not perfectly protected. But that put us in a very complicated position as security people, because we've been working in this traditional environment for so long. We wanted to put the same sorts of things like antivirus onto our devices and have them work the same way, but they can't, unfortunately. So we've had to start to think a little bit differently about security on these devices. I mentioned this already, but the input-output, the way these things are able to communicate, that's our biggest problem, that there's just so many ways. They've got so many chips that can communicate. They're talking cellular, they're talking Bluetooth, they're talking near-field communication. And they've typically got an SD card that you can pop out, or you can add one if it doesn't come with it. It also has, the power cable. It could happen in the traditional PC world as well, certainly, but the problem with the cables in these is that they're also used for data transfer, so they're vulnerable to USB-type attacks, since that's what they use. So we've certainly seen in the past charging cables attacking phones. And also, if you're like me, I always just plug it into the computer. I never have the part that plugs into the wall, so I just plug it into my computer. That's actually was a way that an air-gapped network, so it was a network that didn't have any access to the internet. Government networks often do this, keep the internet away, that's where the scary stuff is. So it didn't have any access to the internet, and an employee there needed to plug in their phone, as one does, hooked it up to one of the computers in the air-gapped network, and the phone had malware on it, and it attacked the computer it was plugged into, and it was then able to access that secure network via the charging cable. So you may see these things at airports. You'll see the charging hubs where you can pay a little money and you can charge your device. Those are kind of scary. They're not necessarily always bad, but they could be. They could easily be designed to attack your device. When you've got a physical connection to the device, certainly there still has to be some sort of exploit and vulnerability involved, but it's a little easier than hitting somebody from across the world. But again, we've seen vulnerabilities like we saw Blueborn. We just saw another Bluetooth vulnerability come out just last week where the chips in the devices are vulnerable to, the user doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to click on a link. They don't have to download anything. They don't have to open anything in their browser. These are full, remote code execution attacks where the user doesn't have to do anything and they can be targeted. So, there's also GPS. In terms of, knowing where people are, right now would probably be a really good time to rob my house back in the US. Well, let's be honest, they could figure it out on Facebook or Twitter, because I posted a lot of selfies with people today saying that I'm here. So now would be a really great time to break into my house. But certainly your devices are watching wherever you are, and anyone who is able to access the device then might be able to track your whereabouts or spoof your whereabouts, tell the GPS system that you're somewhere else, which say you're charged with a crime and your phone, looks like you were there, but you weren't. That would be kind of scary. We've seen attacks against the SIM cards themselves. They actually will run Java applets. So, we've seen in the past some vulnerabilities on there as well. So there's lots of different ways these things can be targeted. But, it all really comes down to, you've got your remote code execution, your MSO 8067s of the, or I guess now we call it Eternal Blue. That's the better one, a newer one, but where the user doesn't have to do anything, or we've got our vulnerabilities, typically called client-side attacks. You sometimes hear them called remote code executions now, I guess because there's less remote code executions in the world these days, where the user will open a document in a PDF viewer, or open something in Google Maps, or open something in their browser, and then that application is attacked, again, some sort of vulnerability. Or, we've got our social engineering attacks where, we just try and get somebody to download something malicious, no vulnerability necessary. If we just put a malicious application on somebody's device because we tricked them into doing it, then, we don't have to worry about finding a vulnerability that's unpatched. So we've got lots of different ways that we can attack these devices, but again, it's kind of more of the same. It's just everything we've dealt with for all these years in security, just bigger and more of them. And it doesn't stop with the single device. For every mobile device or Internet of Things device that you allow into your corporate network in any way, it comes with a lot of other stuff that you have to worry about. It isn't just, is the device up to date? Is it vulnerable to any known vulnerabilities? But it also, it has a cell carrier, based on what SIM card they have in there. It has the carrier network. It has, it wanders around and gets on different Wi-Fi. I don't know if you guys' conferences are like ours in the US, but conference Wi-Fi is generally, a pretty hostile place. In the US, it's a good way to, get your device attacked, is to get on a conference Wi-Fi. You guys might be nicer than that, but we certainly aren't. Certainly the device, depending on what it is, comes with an app store. If it's Android or iOS, it'll come with the relevant app store. It may also have third-party app stores. Amazon has an app store now. That's the third-party app store. So, while they all want to make friends with Amazon, the traditional thing is don't use a third-party app store. But now, even people like Amazon are making a third-party app store. And then it's also got, all the servers for like email, file storage, the application. Those are all just machines out there. They're all just, some Linux box probably somewhere in the cloud that might be vulnerable to, we saw, not too long ago, a new OpenSSH vulnerability came out. And if people are SSHing into those boxes, they probably have something like OpenSSH. Are the people who are running this infrastructure, which again are not us, it's not our corporate security network, it's somebody else, somebody at the vendor or one of the vendors involved, are they updating all their systems? We have to question that, again, with every device that comes in, there's all these other boxes that it's talking to that, again, could have security vulnerabilities, again, could have people falling for social engineering attacks, and it's completely out of our hands. We like to be in control in security. We like to be able to control the security of our organization, but every time we allow one of these devices in, we allow all this unknown. And again, this isn't just mobile. It's really, you can think the same thing about cloud computing, about social media, about all of those things. They open up all these unknowns into your infrastructure. I mentioned social engineering already. Social engineering has the potential to be much bigger than it is in mobility. We've started to see it somewhat. I see a lot of text messages or SMS I see a lot of phishing via SMS. Of course, you can also get email on your mobile devices, but there's also like WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram and things like that. Social media, again, they all have messengers or direct message or ways that you can be targeted. Any way that someone can be presented with a link for something to open or to download is a way they can be served malware. It's a way they can be tricked into opening something that will exploit a vulnerability. I mean, these are all ways that people can be attacked. I mean, there's like a QR code here in the center. Well, not in the center, but over on the side. And I used this in one of my engagements. My customer shared a building, like on the first floor of the building was a restaurant. It was in downtown, so typically the office buildings are upstairs, and then you've got something like a restaurant downstairs. And we put a QR code on a little fake poster in their break room, and it said that if you download this application onto your phone, the next time you go to that restaurant, which they probably go to a lot because it's convenient to them, then they'll get a discount. So they were expecting to get the application for that restaurant, and they did. They absolutely, when they scanned the QR code, they got the application. It was the real application for the restaurant. It just had a little something extra in the form of, it was malware for good in this case, because it was a social engineering engagement to see if people would download it. But, the bad guys would be doing the same thing with real malware. And these are all ways that people can be attacked that, our traditional security awareness training programs, they focus mainly on email. We're doing good. We haven't solved the problem, but we're doing a lot in the way of teaching people not to click on links in emails that are suspicious. But then there's all these other ways that they could be attacked, and we're not really focusing on that in our security awareness training at all. And our users are starting to see it, and they need to be getting that awareness training as well. So what's at risk? I've probably convinced you that there are, vulnerabilities and ways that people can be attacked. But, people are like, who cares? It's somebody's device. But, certainly if there's any corporate data on the device, it could be stolen. Even if it's not corporate data, knowing stuff about the employees might be used to, launch a further attack. So just information that's not related to the organization, we could still use it potentially in an attack to further get into the network. Also, naturally, remotely controlling the device. If I have a malicious application on there, it can call home to a command and control server that will do things like it could send an email to other people in your organization, enticing them to download malicious applications. It could post to Twitter. I don't know how much you guys know about our president in the US, but he has proved that no matter what you say on Twitter, it's going to be okay. So I should really just take that one out, because I thought it would ruin your life to say something ridiculous on Twitter. But that's not always the case, because our president posts some really weird stuff. Naturally, it could also record video of the user. Think about where your device goes with you. Mine goes with me pretty much everywhere. So, turning on the webcam on the computer, potentially bad. Turning on the webcam and recording on the phone, you're probably going to catch somebody in a compromising situation eventually. Certainly, it could break out of any sandboxes. I mentioned that, the applications typically can't see each other. But it certainly could, use privilege escalation, again, the same way we do on traditional devices, to break out of our sandbox and get access to, additional information. And my favorite actually is mobile pivoting, because I mentioned, these things like to get on Wi-Fi networks. They like to, join the coffee shop or the corporate network or the conference network. Typically, in a lot of networks, that gives them access to a lot of other devices. They speak TCP/IP. From a compromised mobile device, you can start attacking traditional devices just over the network. If they're on the same network and they're able to communicate to each other, you can start throwing things like Eternal Blue. You can Nmap, you can Nessus, anything that you can do on a traditional box that you've compromised, you can also do on a mobile device. So use that device to get further access into the organization you're attacking. So what to do? Naturally, we have this problem. We need to fix it. what we had already, we couldn't just put the word mobile in front of the word antivirus and solve the problem the way we had in the past. We had to think differently. So we're going to talk about, what we've done so far and where it falls short in my mind. The natural order of things was, well, let's just have two phones, one for corporate and it's only corporate, and then one for personal. You still see, particularly in the government in the US, people do that, but typically not. We sometimes see dual profile devices. They tend to come up and raise a lot of money with venture capitalists and then disappear just as quickly. Or actually, having two profiles in one device, sometimes they explode because there's just, they try and put, two CPUs, two sets of memory, and, so it either gets really big and you've got, your early phone, and nobody likes that, or, it gets really hot. So it typically, doesn't work out too well. But, we've got Samsung Knox is still around. They always want to call it Black Phone. There's been 5 different companies that have named their phones Black Phone. But what people typically do is application isolation. So they'll have, for instance, 2 PDF viewers, 2 email clients, two of everything, and one of them will be corporate and one of them will be personal, and they'll be isolated, which again, sandboxing, as long as they're on the same memory chip, they can be potentially bypassed, but that's the gold standard that we're using right now, is application isolation. So naturally enter something called mobile device management. A lot of this is brought about by corporate greed. I've realized that, getting people to buy stuff that says it's going to make things secure is very effective, because most people are not security experts, and even people who are, say, security experts at memory corruption vulnerabilities or malware analysis, they're really good at that, or they're really good at securing Windows networks. They may not necessarily be experts at iPhone security, but they're the CISO of the company because they moved up the ladder, and the vendors come in and they say, if you install this mobile device management thing on your network, all your mobile security problems will go away. And that sounds really nice, so people buy it. But what they come to realize is that their mobile devices are still getting attacked, and it's still being successful, and our mobile device management isn't really doing much to stop it. Another part of the problem was that mobile device management is typically bought by operations. Operations always trumps security because operation gets stuff done. Security typically spends money, and if security is going well, nothing happens, which makes security, a really hard sell, because, we build stuff and we sell it to people. That's money, people get paid. We do security well and we don't get attacked. Now what? But a lot of people still have mobile device management, but again, it's typically, it came about because BlackBerry Bez, or BlackBerry Enterprise Server, was a line item on people's budgets. Believe me, I find this just as boring as everyone else. I like to write exploits and do malware analysis and things, but now I have a startup, so I have to think about what people are buying and why, which if you're at all involved in corporate security, which, at the end of the day, even if you're doing exploit development or malware analysis, the people who are paying your bills, who are, hiring you or, buying these exploits from you are, people who are interested in corporate or government security. So we do have to think about this sort of stuff. Again, I realize it's boring. But, these are, the BlackBerry Bez, allowed people not to have to go to the IT department and be like, here's my BlackBerry, make it get, corporate email or corporate whatever. So when people started getting, iPhones and Androids and started bringing them to the enterprise, people wanted the same thing. They wanted to be able to, click on something and, download a configuration profile and magically it works. Think about that, download a configuration profile. If you're at all into social engineering, you probably had a light bulb go off, and you're right, that's a great way to social engineer someone. Say you're, the IT department, and this is the profile that will allow them to access their corporate email, or we've made an update to that and get them to install a profile. That's how you get the malicious apps on the iPhone. 'Cause, it won't run anything that isn't signed by Apple, but you can sign it with a signing certificate for your enterprise. And that's a lot of how the malware comes out. I mean, that's how the jailbreaks work as well. Typically, it installs an application. They have to say yes to install it. Users typically say yes if what they want on the other side is worth it to them. So again, there are still plenty of mobile device managements out there, but people kind of pushed back, and the vendors changed their name. If mobile device management is getting a bad rap, let's change its name to something else, get a new acronym, Enterprise Mobility Management, which is really just more of the same with some more security components added in. I mean, a lot of the stuff that are in these things now are actually available on the device itself, like remote wipe or, a lot of the APIs to manage the device. Those are built into the device now. So a lot of this is actually not very helpful, but I mean, this will give you things like a corporate app store. It'll set up VPN for you. It'll manage those configuration profiles. It'll do those, two applications, one that's internal to the corporation and one that's personal. You can buy these in pieces or you can buy all of it. If you're working in any sort of enterprise, you've probably got something like this. You've probably got your corporate app store, or you've got your VPN and all of that set up for you. And you've probably got something like this. It says Citrix up here, but that's just an example. Everybody's got one. BlackBerry, who basically disappeared for Android and Apple to come along, and when the market now had one of their very own, they bought Good, which was one of the early mobile device managements, and now they have their own enterprise mobility management that they're selling. They still sell devices, but not very many of them, but they're actually now in the enterprise mobility management market. Mobile application management, this is the big piece that people are worried about right now. This is become the gold standard, is managing the application, trying to keep our corporate data isolated. So I guess we've accepted that, there are going to be vulnerabilities on the device. There are going to be, malicious applications that either come with the device or are downloaded by the user. But if we can keep our corporate applications and their data safe, even in this hostile environment that it may be in, then we'll be good. In my experience, this doesn't work out too very well, for instance, with an iPhone jailbreak, we end up getting root access that gets you, basically to ring 0. And it's able to go below any of these sandboxes and see what's in there. It may be able to pull them out of memory. There's different ways to attack it, but it in general hasn't worked out very well. Again, it is able, something not very sophisticated, it can hold up against that, but particularly when the attackers, they either pirate or buy these things. It has Microsoft Intune as the example, but people either pirate these or buy them or get a trial of them and make sure that their exploits and their payloads are working against these things, so they are able to get the data that they want. You're always going to see attackers doing that. They're always going to get access to your preventative security measures and make sure they're able to bypass them. So naturally, we end up right where we started from. We started with wanting to put antivirus on the mobile device, and it didn't work. So, we realized that, we do need to have some endpoint protection. We do need to be doing better than an antivirus that just scans itself, but we do have to have something on the device itself that's able to, see if there's vulnerabilities on it, try and tell whether it's under attack, get an idea of what applications are on it and just, blacklist and whitelist them, which doesn't work very well. But that's what a lot of people are doing now. Your Zimperiums and, a lot of the players in the mobile application management have started doing this as well, being, we call it, the buzz phrase for that is mobile threat defense. So, they had to start a new magic quadrant for that. But, we've got a lot of players in that market as well. But again, it kind of comes back to the same issue of, we're not able to stop everything, And again, the bad guys are, getting access to these tools, and when they are building their payloads and attacks, they're making sure that they are able to bypass it. That's always the problem that we run into on the defensive side, is that the bad guys are finding out what we can catch and just making it look a little different so we don't catch it. So I'm almost out of time, but mobile threats revisited, there's a lot of them. Again, they're kind of breaking into the same categories of, we've got remote code execution attacks, but against a lot of different chips. It's not just the same port 445 anymore. We've got all these different ways that these devices might be attacked. The carrier network itself through a malicious cell tower, or a Bluetooth attack, or something like that may not be available to us. And we've got more applications, we've got more ways to be phished, we've got more applications that we can attack via the client side attacks, we've got more applications, more people like taking them everywhere with them. So we've got all these different ways that they could be attacked. And what's missing for me in a lot of this is, to go back to risk management 101, I'm a pen tester by trade, or penetration tester. I play the bad guy, but for good. I find your vulnerabilities and help you fix them. But that's really what's been missing, I feel like, from the beginning with this mobile thing. We immediately, because it's a good way to make money, again, a lot of this comes down to, we want to make money more than we want to make things secure. We put the word mobile in front of security systems that worked pretty well on the traditional, say, Windows desktop, but we're completely hopeless against, the iPhone or the Android or another mobile device. We never really understood, and I think we're just getting to this point where we realize we never really understood our attack surface. We never really understood what vulnerabilities there are out there, how people are being attacked, how people would likely fall for an attack. So we didn't really ever monitor the risks. And that's what I think is missing, in the mobility world, in the cloud world, in all of this next-gen computing world. We really just need things like Nessus and Metasploit and all the things that we've had for a long time on our traditional devices that we just kind of missed. We just immediately started throwing preventative security on it and never really thought about, well, what preventative measures do we actually need in our organization? They may be different than the traditional customer who uses tool X. That may not be what we need at all, because our corporate infrastructure is different. So absolutely, that's what we need to be doing in our organizations is, we need to bring those devices into our testing program. If you're doing testing to make sure all your Windows patches are in place, or if you're doing security awareness where people get emails that have phishing links in them periodically, you need to bring your mobile devices into those same programs. You need to be saying, what's the patch level on the iPhones? Are they vulnerable to attacks? I don't like to update my iPhone because I need it to stay jailbroken to do application tests naturally, but your average user, they need to be up to date with the latest one. Same thing with Android. Are their applications up to date? Do they have any applications on their devices that are known to be malicious? And again, train them about the social engineering attacks. If you're doing it via email, it's just, one more step to send in text message or WhatsApp or send them Twitter messages. There's all these different ways that they are being attacked in the wild. And again, we've done this. We're pretty good at, remembering to do our penetration testing or our vulnerability analysis or, monitoring our risks on our traditional infrastructure that we control, but we really need to bring your own device into that picture and not just ignore it. I mean, I do a lot of penetration tests still, even though I'm doing product work now, but I do it still, and customers just, they don't know what they want. We have to tell them. If you're on the security team at your organization or you work as a security tester, absolutely, start having the conversation about, these mobile devices aren't just going to stop being attacked just because we don't test them. The attackers don't work that way. And we need to do it more often than we typically do. Unfortunately, we do security testing usually maybe once a quarter, probably more likely once a year. But our mobile devices and our Internet of Things and our cloud computing, they change so rapidly. I mean, you don't typically buy a new workstation or buy a new laptop, but you drop your phone in the toilet, or the Amazon Echo comes out, a new device comes out, and suddenly they're everywhere on your network. So you really have to do this very often because your network is changing so rapidly now. So this is just an example of a tool that does this, but they're telling me I have to get off the stage now. So this is just an example of a tool that it's like Metasploiter Nessus for mobility and IoT. It's free. It hacks iPhones and Androids and fishes them and things. So I'll leave you with, before I take questions, I guess we're almost at 11 years since the iPhone 1 came out. If we say that's the beginning of mobility, has security caught up to it? And my answer to that is no, and the only way we're going to make it catch up is, if we do that security testing, if we, understand the risks that we're actually up against, and build preventative measures that actually, stop the attacks that we're actually seeing, as opposed to just, put the word mobile on the front of something that worked at some time. So that's all I've got for you. And I will take some questions. I do have a translator. If you want to tell it to me in Portuguese, he can tell me what you said. I apologize for not knowing Portuguese.
Pessoal, uma salva de palmas.
Thank you.